Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons where we try and take a darker turn with all the things we do. If you enjoy that kind of content, if you like what you see here, please like, share, and subscribe. Please keep commenting. One of the greatest things we get to do is communicate with you guys, share ideas, and hear some of the incredible things you guys have done. Without further ado, let's jump right into this week's video where we're going to discuss 1D&D's new rogue. 1D&D just released their playtest material for expert classes. This has been just released. It's based on the rogue, the ranger, and the bard, and how their classes will be moving forward. This has had a lot of negativity based particularly around the rogue class, so I really want to dive into that and see what that actually is and whether or not it's really just seen from a wrong perspective, or maybe there is something that's terribly wrong. In either case, this is our opinions here, so if you disagree, please fill out those surveys and really make your presence and opinion known so that way they can reflect those ideas and make the changes that'll make people happier. That's ultimately the goal. It's a game. It's meant to be for fun. Sneak Attack, the iconic rogue ability that's woven tightly into the base class of the rogue. This has been the target of a lot of this changes and what people disagree with, and a lot of people are really upset about. But let's break down what this actually means and start out with what it actually says. You know how to turn a subtle attack into a deadly one. Once on each of your turns, when you take the attack action, you can deal extra damage to one creature you hit with an attack roll. If you're attacking with a finesse weapon, a ranged weapon, and if at least one of the following requirements is met. You have advantage on the attack roll, or at least one of your allies is within 5 feet of the target, the ally isn't incapacitated, and you don't have disadvantage on the attack roll. The big issue a lot of people have been saying, and a lot of people that I know and people I talk to regularly and people I play with, is that now you can't get sneak attack on opportunity strikes, commander strike, or voice of authority from the fighter and the cleric respectively. Commander strike is from the battlemaster, and voice of authority is from the order domain cleric. Each, the commander strike and voice of authority, has to take up your reaction, the same thing as opportunity strike does. So currently, you are able to use your reaction to deal an additional hit, and it will trigger sneak attack if it still meets those requirements. What this changes is that you can no longer do that. You can only get sneak attack on your actual turn. So when you take your turn in combat, making sure to get that one hit in is crucial to you. But that's what makes the rogue, is getting that sneak attack. So obviously you want to stack things in your favor, which is a very roguish thing to do. Taking advantage of circumstances like that is woven strictly between what makes a rogue and not a fighter. Thematically, I think it makes sense to not be able to just sneak attack as a reaction, because there's a certain mythology behind sneak attack. You want to backstab like you do in Elden Ring or something like that. There's a certain anticipation, patience, and waiting for that right moment to make that attack. That's what sneak attack is supposed to represent. By doing a reaction, someone's moving away, it's a quick slash. It's like jumping back or turning when someone makes a noise. That's a reaction. That's something that happens instantaneously. You can't be as methodical with it as you would with a planned attack. So I kind of get that from a story point idea. A lot of people are going to not like this, but understand this. A big problem that a lot of DMs face, especially newer DMs, is that optimized player characters will burn down their bosses so fast. And a big portion of that is using abilities like this. You can attack someone, have someone cast Dissonant Whispers, and if the enemy moves, you can opportunity strike. You can use a lot of different ways for you to do this. Taking additional sneak attacks is going to burn down a huge portion of health of your bosses. Sometimes it'll make these big boss fights seem anticlimactic. Right now, if you get a paladin crit and you get a rogue crit and then you have the rogue attack again, that's basically going to burn down at least half HP of whatever it is you're fighting. That makes your bosses not as potent. And a big portion of that ends up DMs doubling the HP of monsters. which is a concept you should all have heard a bunch of times by now, or give them resistances and not explaining it in order to make their health go further. That's a problem. This is a balancing issue that I believe they're attempting to fix. If you're a DM or forever DM, you know how often you have to just rescale the amount of health or damage a monster has in order to make your players have a fight that's meaningful. Something that ends in 3 rounds because you had someone do 300 damage in one hit, like, it devastates your bosses and it makes them seem so inferior. And it makes them not match up to what the story of what their characters are or the meaning of their triumph is supposed to be. Boss fights should be something that the party barely makes it through. That is meaningful. Your enemies represent a big significance of who you are. As a party, as a group, in real life, whatever it is, you have to have your enemies matter. And making them drop in one turn really defeats that. So a lot of this is to balance that out and make that more feasible in favor of the DMs. At least that's my opinion. Yes, it's going to hurt rogues a lot, but understand now, whenever you take the attack action with the new dual-wielding 2-weapon fighting ability, you take 2 attacks whenever you take the attack action. So you're getting a little bit more damage than you would normally. You're losing sneak attack, but I think ultimately this will balance your classes out in regards to the DM actually being more of a player as opposed to an obstacle. And I think that's the big problem that people see when they look at this. They look at this purely from a player's perspective and not a perspective of a DM and an entire group playing one game together. Because I've said this a bunch of times, you are not the enemy of the DM. You guys are on the same side. This balances out and finally gives the DM a buff in situations that are much easier for people who are new, who are learning, or are not just used to how certain people play. Is it exciting? No. Is it flashy? No. Is it something that I think a lot of people are upset about? And you know what? Yeah, no one likes to be nerfed. But I think this helps to balance out over abuse of the mechanics. And it really is a tough thing to negotiate because you don't know how things are going to go. You don't know when you're going to use that reaction because you still have Uncanny Dodge, which is something we're just about to get into. The second core feature of the rogue that I think has gotten quite a change is Uncanny Dodge. Now, this used to be a reaction whenever you took damage from an enemy that you can see, and you would half the damage from whatever that thing was. Now it has changed to something a little different. It reads as follows. When an attacker that you can see hits you with an attack roll, you can use your reaction to have the attack's damage against you, rounded down. Now, your reaction was used for this previously, so that hasn't changed. The only difference is now it can only be used for attack rolls. So saving throws will eliminate your availability to use Uncanny Dodge, which I think ultimately makes the rogue squishier. It makes it easier for the rogue to be taken down because it is not as capable of just continuously having damage every single turn. I like things to be difficult. I make my life incredibly difficult. My joy should be no different. This being said, it makes the rogue squishier. It makes the rogue more adept at needing to make smarter decisions and play more risk and reward based and think their actions through, which I think is pretty nice for a rogue. As a thief class, you shouldn't be up in front and you should kind of be trying to hide as often as possible. Being able to dodge things, but you like everything with a saving throw is a little much. You know, you get to use it constantly, and when you get higher level, it's every single round is basically used for that anyway. Whenever you're attacked, you will most likely be using Uncanny Dodge as your basic reflex. Unless, of course, you're in a party with a fighter who happens to be a battlemaster or an order domain cleric, in which case you're going to want to use your reaction to sneak attack currently. But this is the give and take of the class. That's the risk and the reward, is whether or not you're going to use Uncanny Dodge or whether or not you're going to try and gain another attack. And if you do, how close you have to be is very dangerous for you. Understand that when you hit 9th level, you gain access to evasion. And evasion reads as follows. You can nimbly dodge out of the way of certain dangers. When you are subject to an effect that allows you to make a dexterity saving throw, you take only half damage. You instead take no damage if you succeed on the saving throw, and only half damage if you fail. And you can't use this feature if you're incapacitated. So once you hit 9th level, you always have evasion, so dexterity saves being a very common save, and being something you're already good at, you have that ability. So you miss out on the other saving throws because of Uncanny Dodge, but I think the purpose here is to make your rogue feel squishier. It makes you require a certain level of bravery to play your rogue subclasses. This changes the swashbuckler, because now being up front and being alone is a little bit more scary. But you have that roguish quality to you, that bravery, that I'm probably not going to make it, but I have to do it because nobody else can. Because who better to get in and out than the thief, than the rogue, than the one who sneaks around? And not wearing heavy armor and not having a high hit die is really something that reflects that. I get it. I don't particularly like it. I do like the idea of using Uncanny Dodge to get kind of out of a lot of things. But as a balancing issue, it does constrict that a little, and it makes your hit points that much more valuable. It makes your risks that much more important, and it grooms you into being a smarter player. I think a lot of people are disappointed in this, and I can understand that. If you start taking away survivability, and you start to change the way the dynamics work for their offensive damage, it looks poorly. It does on the surface. It really does. But when you base the concept on how much damage you can do, and the possibilities of what you can do, and what ideas you can have to give yourself things like advantage, and constantly hiding in combat, making it difficult for you to be seen and noticed, being creative and being in circumstances where you do have corners to get around, can make a huge impact. And it can make it hard for you to get targeted anyway. In some ways, the rogue has a lot of great defensive features that make them significantly more survivable than they should be. And that's just a fact. If you look at it from not a player's perspective, it's very easy to see that. You can move with dash as your bonus action and as your regular action and just fly across the screen and escape. You know, like, you have a lot of great things coming for you as the rogue as a basis. Being able to fight is supposed to be very tricky for you. You're not a trained fighter. You're not a barbarian. You're not a paladin. You're not even a valor bard or a swords bard or a warlock. You're not built for that. You're built for one hit and then run like mad. And a lot of that gets lost in 5e. And I get it. Everyone wants to survive. Everyone wants to do everything with their character. Everyone wants to be this tough character. But the rogue is never meant to be tough. The rogue is meant to be deadly. You're supposed to be a glass cannon. Taking away a few of the defensive things, I get it. I really, really think this is a better improvement, because it makes the rogue, instead of an everybody class, it makes it a class for people who are experienced, who know the risks, and who are willing to take them. And I like things being difficult. This entices me more to play this class, because there's an extreme level of danger that wasn't there before. There's no safety net. If I'm going in there, if I'm going to be melee, I'm taking my life in my own hands, everything I do. And if that's not a rogue, what is? At 13th level, you gain an ability that I think is rather interesting. You gain the ability called Subtle Strikes, and it reads as follows. When you attack, you know how to exploit a target's distraction. You have advantage on any attack roll that targets a creature that is within 5 feet of at least one of your allies who isn't incapacitated. This is quite a big offensive buff for you. This limits how often you'll miss, which means you're almost guaranteed to get sneak attack at this point at 13th level almost every turn, which is valuable. If you're 2-weapon fighting, which I imagine you would be, that's an additional damage die that you're adding onto your weapon. I don't know if I've mentioned this previously, I probably didn't, but 2-weapon fighting now, when you make an attack with 2 light finesse weapons, you make an additional attack with the other weapon as part of that same attack. So that's 2 attacks for that 1 attack roll. What I mean is, if you attack with 2 short swords, it's now 1d6 for your regular attack, but because you're holding a second one, you can use that second short sword and do another 1d6 as part of that same attack, almost like extra attack. So in turn, you could do 2d6 plus 10 with 2 short swords. That's exciting. I happen to love that change, but we'll probably get into that a little bit later, or another video. But having advantage, having 2 attacks on your turn, that's pretty good. And if you crit, now you're critting and doing 3d6 plus 10. You know, it's a pretty decent way to guarantee your effectiveness in combat. I like this ability. I like that it really increases the importance of your attack, and you're working with your party, and you're waiting for someone else to be engaged in combat and run up behind and do that sneak attack. That's what this feels like. With the rogue, if you miss on your turn, that's it. You know, it's crushing to you. I think there's a lot of things here to substitute that and make that feel enticing and very, very good for you, and makes your one attack more useful and more guaranteed and more capable. And as a rogue, you really need to hit that attack. I think this works. I think this works because it guarantees you more hits and it doesn't overpower you. I think this might be their subtle change to increase the loss that people might think they're feeling with the new change to sneak attack. I like that it gives you a good sustainable advantage to attack something. And at 13th level, a lot of campaigns are ending at this point. You have this for boss fights. You know, a lot of times this is an ability you will see often. And I think that's a pretty strong move forward into this category. At 14th level, you get your final subclass feature, and this is going to be really quick. I think that's awesome. That means that you'll be getting these abilities, these final capstone subclass abilities early on, that you might be able to make them viable in most of the campaigns you play, which is amazing. It's going to be a lot of skills you don't ever get seen, a lot of things that people wish they could do that are now going to be really tangible, and I hope they really keep this for the subclass, for all the classes across the board, because it feels cool, and now you feel like you've made it. And since a lot of campaigns end around this level, I think that's a good way to understand where the community is, where the campaign is, and this desire to have abilities you never get to see. There are only 2 other abilities that really should be mentioned. Slippery Mind has gotten a little stronger, because not only do you get wisdom proficiency in saving throws, you also get charisma proficiency in saving throws, which benefits you in the long run. Wisdom being the abilities that often debilitate you, take you out of combat, controller abilities, fears, things like that. And charisma tend to be charm or fey magic like that really requires you to break out of it. So I get having that as a buff, though charisma saves aren't as constant. It's a good thing to have, especially if you're sacrificing some of your other abilities or the effectiveness of some of them, like your Uncanny Dodge or your evasiveness. It does help, but I'm not too upset about a small buff. It really doesn't feel poorly to me. It feels really reliable in my mind. The only thing you do actually lose flat out is Blind Sense. Now, if you'd never played a rogue before, Blind Sense is you can sense anything within 10 feet of you. Meaning, if someone casts a spell, Darkness, you can be in that darkness and you can sense enemies around you and thus make an attack successfully on them without suffering disadvantage, meaning you have advantage because you can still tell where they are. And they cannot because they are effectively blinded. It's great. It's effective if you're in that situation where you're playing with people that use the darkness spell often. Outside of that, Blind Sense is really just a utility tool to see if anyone's sneaking around you or feeling anyone within your presence that shouldn't be there. Often enough, this ability will go unused through most campaigns. I haven't seen it often. I really don't use it. It really doesn't register too much with me. But if you are someone who does actually build around that and really incorporate that into your character, this is definitely going to change how you play. If you're playing a phantom rogue and you're out like hiding underneath the dirt with your ability, you can't sense things moving out around you. Changes how you plan things out? It does. But understanding, as a rogue, blind sense really never makes a lot of sense to me. It seems something like a trained monk would know, where you can sense the natural key energy of things around you, or the void of key energy in something moving around you. It seems to be something like that, or a very attuned fighter, or like a samurai, or even a barbarian, or something that's trained to fight rangers. That really makes the most sense to me, to have an ability like blind sense. But for a rogue, I kind of embrace this like dangerous, I don't exactly know what's going on kind of a feel with things that are invisible and magically oriented, or how capable of doing that. So I don't really miss it that much, though it is a noticeable ability that has been removed. Our final thoughts. The new direction that the expert classes are going into is something that I think is best represented in a video that Jeremy Crawford did, where he was explaining how to create your own subclasses. And the reason being is because they emphasize the importance of the story of the subclass and how that translates into the actual game. I think when you look at sneak attack and the removal of it being applied on turns that aren't yours, I think it changes people's perspective. I think it hones in on the story and what sneak attack actually means. And I think that fits well with the story. I like Uncanny Dodge not giving you this perfect half damage across the board for everything, and giving it just for something that can actually see you and make an attack roll. I think that's great. I think it works. I think gaining Slippery Minds benefits, although you do get it at a higher level, it does cover almost all magic classes of saving throws. So you're pretty good. I do want to say that when optimizers look at this and players look at this, you're looking at it purely from a player's perspective, and you're not looking at it from a DM's perspective. And the lack of doing so makes it harder to conceive the full picture of what this game takes to work. I think this is a nerf. I'm not going to deny that. But I think it's a nerf in the benefit for the overall story. Because if you keep doing things like this to a point and not going too far with it, you get DMs that have monsters that actually survive long enough to be threatening, to feel dangerous, to make you feel like, oh man, killing this boss really meant something. It was grueling. It was difficult. We didn't know if we were going to win, but we beat the boss. And that is a triumphant feeling. And that's what you want when you fight bosses. You want to feel like you did something great, not just, oh, I just downed another enemy. And when you have bosses that have the longevity to survive that, it's beneficial. This is ideally, I believe this is to eliminate this need for doubling the HP of monsters, or making them resistant to everything and not playing it out, so that way they exist, or buffing up their armor class so they don't get hit as often. On the use of reactions, a lot of times people think that because abilities exist like Opportunity Strike, Commander Strike, or Voice of Authority, and abilities like that, or anything else that might be coming out at this after this point, a lot of the times people think of it in a vacuum. Where like, if this is one combat a day and then you get a long rest, then yeah, you can get your reaction every turn to make a sneak attack. But that's not how the real world works. Often or not, you'll be saving your reaction so that way you don't get hurt if you're in a melee area. It is not easy to just guess right whether you should use your reaction for this or for that. And if someone uses this ability on you, you're pigeonholed. If you're a smarter monster and you see that it uses reaction for this, then yeah, you know what? How dare you attack me again? And then you use your attacks and attack it more often. That's reasonable. That's putting a target on you for dealing more damage. Now you can't use Uncanny Dodge. The risk and reward is there. I like that concept. But if you start to take away from the dependency on other classes to make your damage go up, it changes things. How often do you Opportunity Strike when you're a rogue and everyone else is casters? Who's moving these monsters? Why are they going to just walk by you as opposed to just keep punching you in the face? I think the concept of losing something like that is worse on paper than it is in practice. Maybe I'm wrong. And I'm pretty sure all my optimizer friends and family that are going to look at this video are going to be chomping at the bit to get at me for it. And please, tell me, talk to me about it. And most importantly, answer the survey and put those words down there as well. So that way they can hone in on what the story of the rogue is and how it's changed by removing that, if that's really how you feel. I do believe it makes sense. I like the idea. I like some of the changes. I like that you're getting your final subclass abilities early. I really, really embrace that. With that said and done, we're going to bring this video to a close. I really do implore you, please take the survey, play the class, try it, see if it really makes that big of a difference, or see if it feels better. See if your DM feels better. Fight a boss and see if the DM's like a little bit of pride that he didn't drop in the first round. Let them see. Try. The best thing that can come out of this is you got to play a little extra D&D. The worst thing that came out of it, you might have to speak up, and sometimes that gives people anxiety. But we're here together. And if nobody can know that you don't like something, nobody can change it. And don't fear it if you don't like it. If 1D&D comes out and you're like, I don't like this, let it be known, there's still older versions of D&D being played right now. People are still playing advanced Dungeons and Dragons. People are playing 2.5. People are still playing them online. Wherever you look, there is a D&D community playing the version that you might like the best. If it's not 1D&D, do not feel like you're left in the past. You are not forgotten. We are still here for you. And thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.